Thank you, everyone, for coming to tonight's work session on community power. We're excited to have both members of our Portsmouth Energy Advisory Committee here, the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire. We have Don Kreis, who is the consumer advocate. Is that the correct title? I think
that is my title.
That's your title. And so excited to be able to go through. Before I pass it to the city manager, just ask quickly to introduce yourselves to everyone so we can get on a first name basis. And we can start over here with Henry.
I'm Henry Herndon. I'm the Executive Director of the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire.
And I'm Jackson Kaspari. I'm the Director of Member Services.
I'm Don Kreis, as the mayor said. I'm the state's consumer advocate. I run a cute little state agency. We represent the interests of the state's residential utility customers.
I'm Peter Britz, Director of Planning and Sustainability. Peter Rice, Director of Public Works. I almost forgot one.
I almost forgot. Okay.
Jillian Harris, I'm Principal Planner in the Planning Department.
Peter Somsich, I'm a member of the Portsmouth Energy Advisory Committee.
Tom Rooney, also a member of the Energy Advisory Committee.
Ben D'Antonio, resident of Portsmouth and member of the committee.
Kevin Charette, also a member of the committee.
Tracy Cameron, member of the committee.
All right.
City Councilor? No.
We have the city council. Well, not that anybody knows who we are, but that's just save time. But I want to thank you all for taking time out of your day for traveling here, and then for just focusing on a topic that is always of the utmost importance when we're talking about rates. A lot of stuff that gets into the weeds, but it's one of those things that people see directly every month as an opportunity to see how we're doing compared to how we want to be doing. So appreciate the focus that we're bringing on this evening, and I'll pass it over to our city manager, who's going to walk through or set up the presentation.
Thank you, Your Honor. And my one job tonight is to remind you of the hospitality rule of if you're going to speak in the microphone, make sure you have the microphone near you. There's a lot of shared use of the microphone tonight, so we want to make sure everyone can hear. And with that, I'll share the presentation and turn it over to you, Henry. Does that make sense?
Thank you to the City Council for inviting us out. We're pleased to be here with you tonight. We have what I hope will be a brief presentation, but really we're looking forward to getting into the Q&A and discussion with the Council and with our other colleagues in the committee. And I'll recap just briefly. So we're here to talk about Portsmouth Community Power and the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire. Our organization is a nonprofit joint powers agency created by 68 New Hampshire cities, towns, and counties. We are an extension of those municipal governments and their municipal authorities under state law to develop local control energy supply programs. And Portsmouth was one of the first cities and towns in the state to launch a program back in 2023. So being 3 years into the program, I think this is a great time to rejoin the council and give it a little bit of an update on Portsmouth's program, the market statewide, and some of the competitive landscape in the market. So we'll move into the presentation in just a minute, but we'll talk about our financial outlook for the organization and community reserves. We'll talk about the competitive landscape. We'll revisit some of the benefits of community power. I understand a couple of topics of interest from the council are contract terms and customer refresh enrollment policy and practice. So we'll touch on those items as well. And to kick us off, I'll have our Director of Member Services, Jackson Kaspari, start the presentation.
Great. Thank you, Henry. Mr. Mayor, City Councilors, once again, Jackson Kaspari, Director of Member Services for CPCNH, members of the committee, Mr. Kreis, we appreciate the opportunity to provide this update this evening. To kick us off, I wanted to get everyone oriented around the website for Portsmouth Community Power. It's undergone some major improvements since it was first created on behalf of the city's program. So I would encourage you all and those at home to go check out that website. You're looking at really the top of the home page on the slide that's in front of you, and there are some quick access buttons that make it easy for customers to navigate within the website environment. You'll see front and center there's the ability to link to sign up for rate announcements, and we'll get into that more in a moment. But there's also another link where customers can click to quick access utility and other supplier rates, and that will bring them to the Department of Energy's shopping website where they can compare between all of the rate options available for them within the state of New Hampshire. So moving on to the next slide, I mentioned the customer communications component. There are three main ways that customers are able to interact to take actions on behalf of their accounts. That is to opt in, opt up, opt down, or opt out, and they can do that by emailing our info@communitypowernh.gov address, by calling our contact number that's listed there, or by using our self-service portal. So they're able to interact in those three ways. I mentioned the rate announcements. Well, we have the ability for customers to sign up for our mailing lists, and they can get a whole host of types of information through that, but the rate announcements tend to be of greatest interest, and that simply takes a name, an email, and then now we've rolled out a feature where they can put in their cell phone number, and we're able to send SMS text alerts. So that has improved our accessibility for rate change information and is an option available to all Portsmouth residents and business owners. Moving on to the next slide. This by the number slide is something we like to do for our programs. It just does a quick capture of where things stand as of our latest reporting. So currently, or as of April 1, Portsmouth Community Power had a little over 11,500 active customers, equating to a 70% customer participation rate within the city. Customers on whole have experienced savings as of our last financial reporting, 1.6 million. We calculate for the entirety of those residents and business owners that have participated through the program. And Portsmouth has generated currently 586,000 in joint reserves. Those are community-held reserves. As a nonprofit government instrumentality, we do not have shareholders, so any excess that's generated from rates goes into community reserves. Those are used to help stabilize rates over time and can be an excellent tool for the nonprofit to offer competitive products and programs on behalf of our customers. Henry will talk more about the finance component a little bit later. Those joint reserves are forecasted to grow to 1.3 to 1.6 million this rate period. That's between the P5 and the P95 outcomes. So that's, if you can imagine a bell curve, the 5th to 95th percentile with the 50% or the median falling in the middle. And the reason there's a relatively tight band there is we are operating in such a way where the organization has a low risk appetite. So we're locking up essentially all of our power forecasts within fixed price contracts, which are helping to, or hedge contracts, excuse me, which are helping to mitigate the volatility in the joint reserve growth. In terms of retail load, we served a lot of load in Portsmouth as a power organization, over 271 million kilowatt hours since the program went live in 2023. If you turn to the next slide, please. So if you go to the rate buildup, this is going to show what the different components of the rate are going towards at this present moment. So the average rate between the residential rates and the commercial rates for Portsmouth falls at about 14.5 cents per kilowatt hour. 82% of that is going towards the cost of energy and the renewable portfolio standard, which is set by the state, and we purchase renewable energy certificates to satisfy that requirement. And then there's 14% at this current moment in time that's going towards the community reserves. That is a place where the board, which is representing all of our communities, has an opportunity to establish different levels of reserve accumulations on behalf of the programs. So that segment can be adjusted in time, and Henry will, I think, get into more details on that. And then we have a pretty small OPEX overall. 4% of the rate goes towards OPEX. We have a lean staff, and so that covers staff and contractor expenses mainly. And then with that, I would turn to the next slide here and talk a little bit about how we monitor customer activity on behalf of the program. So we have weekly meetings with our broader customer service team, and we have a dashboard that's integrated that we can view that shows us week over week customer activity for all of our programs, including Portsmouth. You're actually seeing a figure for Portsmouth here, and I'm showing opt-outs. It's a little bit interesting to view the opt-out trends because we'll see spikes in customer activity around when we announce rates, and of course there's the refresh I know you're familiar with, and so there was a spike of customer activity as a result of that and a city communication. And so that's just to show you that, you know, we have this data available. We're happy to share it in detail. And this is just a little snapshot about what that looks like. With that, I'm going to pass it back to Henry to talk about the financial outlook.
Thanks, Jackson. So we'll talk about financial outlook, and what we're looking at here, I'll just try to orient us around this graph. This is a financial accrual forecast. This is a forecast of our community reserves, which is essentially the net margin of the enterprise. And you can see essentially coming out of this winter, we have a record high winter on the left, record high cost winter with the graph on the left. And we'll get into that on some of the next upcoming slides, but some of us may have seen Governor Ayotte talking about this nearly $1 billion cost overrun that we saw in ISO New England associated with this new day ahead ancillary services initiative, this new DAISY aspect in the wholesale market. So that's something that applies to all suppliers. But the organization is in a period of reserve growth. You can see essentially that if you recall the green bar in the rate bar chart on the top, that was the reserve adder, accounts for the fairly steep growth of reserves from January 26 through July 26, our current rate period, that current reserve adder in the rates, and then a tapering as we meet, you know, a net positive accrual position mid-year and trend towards our minimum reserve targets as far out as January 2029. So again, just to orient folks, being, you know, active in the wholesale power markets, these are volatile markets. We do probabilistic forecasting. There's the narrow band during the current rate period, as Jackson described, in that we have purchased fixed cost contracts. So there's a narrow range of outcomes for the short term. Heading into the coming months, we will similarly sort of hedge out or purchase fixed price contracts for upcoming rate periods. So that widening of the band that you see from the green sort of best case scenario to the yellow worst case scenario will become much more narrow as we procure power moving into the future rate periods. But, you know, in sort of the median outcome, looking at building to, you know, a healthy, say, $7 million in reserve by the end of this calendar year, and then again approaching those targets. So as Jackson mentioned, the reserve fund is a stabilization fund. It's a fund to protect against rate bumps in the future and support the long-term benefits of the program. Yeah, perhaps I will leave it there. I'll just note that, so it's the minimum target is 60 days of operating cash. And then happy to come back to any of these slides with discussion or Q&A, but I think we'll just try to wrap up the presentation before getting to that. One of the items we want to discuss with the council sort of the competitive energy landscape. So again, if we sort of zoom out, the community power market, it launched in the state in 2023, and the state really embarked on a bit of a market transformation in the energy space. Since that time, we've seen 75, 80 cities and towns in the state move to these local control energy programs. That represents about 30% of customers in the state in the past 3 years. During that time period, we've seen sort of the market adapt. We've seen the regulators of the Public Utility Commission and the utilities change the way in which they buy power supply. They've moved from fixed price contracts to a spot market operation where they set a proxy rate. They sort of estimate what the cost of power will be in the market. You see that range of outcomes from the prior graph. And they set a proxy rate as an estimation. That proxy rate may end up being under the cost of power, over the cost of power. And what we found during the current period, or recent periods, is the utility proxy rate has under-collected relative to market costs. So there are some deferred costs that are accumulating within the utility supply portfolio. So there's an article that I have written here that's been printed out and handed out for you all that references some legislation the folks in Concord at the State House and at the Public Utility Commission are looking at this question and saying, well, how will we sort of manage the recovery of the deferred costs from this new utility approach to pricing? That's an open question that is unfolding and relevant for sort of some of the market dynamics. And again, this context is somewhat exacerbated by some of the record prices we've seen in recent years. In this past winter. So again, happy to have Q&A on that, but I will move to the next slide. Also for the council's consideration, we've provided our recent market update, just talking about the state of the market, this day-ahead ancillary services charge, which is relevant as it was a material change in the market with impacts region-wide across the 6 New England states, and some other details. And looking forward, there are good opportunities, I think, in the near term, some of our communities to push on innovation in terms of data sharing and some of the distributed energy programs that some of our communities are excited about. So I'd be happy to take questions on that as well. But moving to the next slide. So speaking about our outlook and sort of the path to increased competitiveness for the market, we've seen the market really evolve over the past couple of years since these programs have launched in a couple of ways. And any market transformation is it's not necessarily always a smooth process, but as we look forward, the current rates, they cover costs. We're building reserves for the coalition and for Portsmouth, creating the ability to taper reserve adders in the future and provide customer rate relief as soon as the next rate period. So building reserves is a key tool towards future rate relief and stability. This also helps lower interest and financing expenses for further rate relief. Currently, we have a couple of open hirings for senior staff in finance and in power operations that we'll be filling shortly. So building internal staff capacity. We have these functions filled on contract basis. We rely on some consultants, and as an organization matures, we're looking to bring some of those capabilities in-house and further invest in portfolio management. And there are some other long-term strategies in our business plan towards providing more benefit and value for customers. We can participate more directly in the wholesale power markets as reserves build, achieving credit ratings and securing some of the low-cost financing that we have accessible to us as a municipal entity. These are all medium to longer term advantages that we can use to improve rate competitiveness for customers. And then looking a little further out, we have developed, I think it is the largest solar array in the state in the town of Warner that benefits a number of our cities and towns. And that's sort of the beginning of the local project development that a lot of municipalities are interested in. So in the longer term, there's a real opportunity for competitive advantage by building local projects and bringing some of that generation and supply home, getting the local economic benefits from that, and defraying some of the wholesale power costs we would otherwise have to pay. So that's some of the longer term outlook, and I think that probably covers much of my next slide. But the one thing I'll also mention here, as a coalition, we do have folks in government affairs. We're active at the legislature and at the Public Utility Commission, working to ensure the interests of our member communities are represented there, and that's an important aspect of the work that we do. I think there's just a photo of that first community solar project here. So that's a general overview and update for the council. And I know we sort of threw a lot of information out, but I enjoy the Q&A and discussion aspects of this, so I'm looking forward to getting into the details. And I know we also are not the only guests at the table, so I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Henry. Do we have, you want to start off with questions or any other comments? Councilor Bagwell.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron. I've got a couple questions. On your website for, April 1st, 2026, you show Portsmouth opt-outs, new opt-out says 372. But on the presentation you just gave us, you show 33. Which number is correct?
slide. So you're talking about the customer activity dashboard?
That's correct.
At this point? Yeah, so those are showing week by week opt-out stats, and then I don't know what you're referring to on the website exactly. Oh, the opt-action report?
Yes.
So you may be looking at, let me see if I can pull that up in front of me. Which version is that? Is that as of April 1?
As of April 1st. So it was posted 4/15 on your website in the community documents.
So this is showing week over week trends. That report may have a sort of moment in time capture as to a new change. I will need to pull it out of my bag so I can reference it. So I can do that real quick if you'd like.
Where are you seeing 32?
It's not within the
On their slide,
presentation.
Do all these numbers add up to the 331?
they don't even come close.
Is it a lifetime versus the snapshot in time?
It says changes from previous month. I'm just, it would be helpful to know, you know, the data. The other question I have is the refresh, the large refresh that was done for Portsmouth. I've heard numbers from 2,500, 3,000. And then right here, it says there are 2,438 new users and 478 new unenrolled, which would, it'd be helpful to know what kind of numbers we're talking about, people getting opted into community power, because,
Yep.
correct me if I'm wrong, but that will increase their supply rate by 30%.
That is true. So in terms of a mailer count, there were 2,486 mailers to be exact, which resulted in, at the time, 3,004 identified accounts eligible for the refresh. And so that's what we're talking about to statistics there. Sometimes, you know, we get new data from the utility after the fact that says some of these accounts that were identified as being eligible are no longer eligible for whatever reason. There may have been a change to account, but, you know, between when we got the data and we actually sent out the mailer. Of course, customers also have the opportunity to opt out before they're enrolled. We send them a notice that tells them exactly how to do that. And I know Portsmouth took the additional step of sending another mailer as well.
And that'll segue to my next question. Who made the decision when the mailer was sent out to those 2,500 people, I believe it was, or 2,500 residents? Whose decision was it not to include the Eversource rate that would show the differential in price?
So we have a standard template that we use for all of our programs. The website, as I mentioned earlier, which folks are directed to interact with, has the ability for a customer to access the utility and all other supply rates through a shopping comparison tool. We want customers to be aware under the customer choice component of this that they don't just have two options, which is the utility rate and our rate. They actually have a whole host of options, and if they're going to shop, they may as well look at all the options available to them in the state of New Hampshire. So that is our perspective.
So when the initial postcard went out, when Portsmouth enrolled in community power, the rate savings were shown. When did that process change where you'd show both the Eversource rate and the community power rate?
So the initial enrollment mailers, while detailed, were very long. They were about 6-page letters. We found them hard for most people to digest who weren't making it very far into that letter. And so while they were very detailed, they provide good information, we decided it would be better for a consumer to streamline some of that information into a shorter form postcard format. We're definitely open to feedback. We work on behalf of our communities, so I'm happy to take feedback from this council and this committee on, you know, what we should include in the future.
Well, I would think to most residents of Portsmouth, I don't know about other communities, but from the feedback I'm getting, the cost of the electricity is important to them. So it would be important to them on that postcard to include the cost of their current electricity and the increased cost of community power. And how that didn't make it to the postcard, I think is unusual.
Okay, well, thank you for your feedback on that. I see Councilor Tabor has
Just before we go to Council Tabor, just one question on the, just while we're staying with the technical aspects of this, and this is something that I think I read Mr. Crease talking about. So So Chris, you made the drive, so anytime you want to chime in, I appreciate doing so. But that ultimately figuring out an easier way to change between power sources is something that, I heard you said it's something that when I went to the website, and I did appreciate a lot of the refresh in terms of the communication and information that's shared there. It's still iframed in though, in terms of being able to like go down and make a change on that. It still looks like you're hosting a application, maybe that's not what's happening, but being able to directly in the website, like when you land on Portsmouth Community Power, to like have all of the, have the fact that, we're on Eversource. I believe that's our default utility. Is anybody else on Liberty here in Portsmouth? No. So
Eversource.
like to be able to like have that all default so that it's just taking out steps, and it seems like it's calling another server and coming back and answering a question here. So I guess investments to make that a lot easier would be something that, because it can time out, it can get people frustrated, and then they're kind of left wondering, okay, what is this process? And they get, they come back to it, and then they only kind of remember that they should have completed that if they are as price sensitive to not build up our own reserves here in Portsmouth or want to invest in green energy, and they get frustrated again at the end. So I guess just direct feedback would be to make improvements on the website so that it is tailored specifically to Portsmouth. If somebody wants to opt out and they don't have to think about, because they just might not know, that they're on Eversource or not. A lot of people, I think they look at the number versus the letterhead on the electrical bill more than, we might want to think at this point. So if that could be a lot easier, that would be helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'll allow Mr. Crease to chime in momentarily if you would like. I just want to let you know that is something we're actively working on to remove an additional step of that selection process. When we consolidated our websites, we had to get creative in some of the initial infrastructure that was built into that. Like I said, we're a small staff team, so we are constantly working to improve the functionality, and one of the improvements that we will be implementing is to remove some of that extra selection that's currently required, so the information is more readily available on the page front and center.
Thanks. Councilor Tabor.
Thanks, Mayor. First off, I just wanted to say that because of Councilor Bagley's motion to have the city manager report back on withdrawing from the coalition, we took up that topic at the April Energy Advisory Committee meeting. We had a good deliberation about it. And at the end of that discussion, we summarized our concerns about the program overall. But as we went around the table, none of our members at this point was ready to jump off the train. They felt that would be premature. That's not to say we don't have concerns, concerns about the negative reserves right now, concerns about long-term competitiveness, buying energy, and concerns about the communication of the rate comparisons when they're unfavorable to CPC&H. And I'll let our members speak to those because we're in touch with CPC&H on a pretty regular basis. Tom Rooney is on the board as our representative. But I wanted to tell the council about that deliberation, and it's all on video if you want to watch it. And I think you'll see a great deal of expertise applied to the issues that we've been facing. Second, to your point about communicating to refresh customers, there's a strong feeling in the Energy Committee that we need to be open and transparent when the rates are unfavorable to CPC&H and show the difference. And in, the coalition doesn't send rate notifications directly in your bill. Eversource does. So the model that CPC&H has is they tell their member communities what the rates are, and it's the member community's job to communicate that. And this January, when the rates were unfavorable, We worked with Stephanie Secord to craft a press release, use seacoastonline.com, used various communication channels to say, right now, you can save yourself $22 a month by opting out and going with Eversource. But, you know, we've chosen to be with Community Power Coalition for the long term to enhance competition and have more local control. That message reached a lot of people, and we figured that was our job. But I think this is a chance to talk to the coalition about transparency in the rate communications, which our group really favored, and I'll let them speak to that.
Kevin?
Yeah, I just agree with everything Councilor Tabor just said, and I just piggyback. You know, it's fantastic we have, I think, CPC&H. It's great to have another option in the market, and as it grows, you know, you're already the second largest supplier in the state. I think all groups need to do a better job of communicating the ability to switch and to opt. From my experience and background, I can guarantee you, if you do a sampling of customers around the state, there's very, very little knowledge about the ability to switch, and there's very little knowledge in terms of what their rate is right now compared to, say, to the utility. So I think it's incumbent on all of us to really ratchet up the message around being able to opt. And it's not just that one time when the rate gets issued, changed, you know, in January and again in July. It's on a regular basis, and that's on us as members. It's on CPC&H. I think it's on the consumer advocate. It's on the PUC. This market's going to be different for the foreseeable future, and we need to do a better job of really making sure residents and customers know that there's this ability to opt, and this is just the way the market is, and you have to pay attention. And then to that end, I think on the rate standpoint, you know, and Councilor Bagley mentioned when we first had the enrollment mailers, there's the box, right? And it had the options for CPC&H and the default rate. That exact same box is in your refresher mailer, but we dropped off the utility rate. And I think that was a mistake. And also, I just look at press releases when, you know, and to remind folks here, for 4 rate periods in a row, CPC&H was lower than the utility. We've had 3 in a row that are now higher, which is unfortunate, but 4 out of 7, they've been lower. But if I look back at your press releases when we were lower, CPC&H, you guys were very clear in your press releases. We are lower than the utility, and there was language to that effect. If you look at your press releases, since you've been higher than the utility, it's crickets. And I think that CPC&H needs to, you represent members, you're a nonprofit of sorts, and it's in your best interest, I think, to just play it down the middle with your communication. When you're higher, just be consistent with the communications from rate period to rate period, and I think you'll earn increasing trust from the communities that we're playing it straight. Because you really need to go on an Easter egg hunt to find out what the utility rate is, because it's not in your mailers here. Your website's improved, but again, it's not on your website. You're clicking on a link that takes you to the state, and then when you go to the state, I would say that website's not the best. It's under something aggregations. You really need to go on a search to find the utility rate to then compare to see if it makes sense to opt out. So I would just encourage that we be very, I know, Jackson, you mentioned, well, there's other players in the market, but the main comparison I think you should be clear on is at any point in time, how do we compare to the utility, and let customers make the choice. And they might opt back and forth. You know, you have enough customers, you can deal with some attrition. But I think you should be clear in terms of what that utility rate is in your communication pieces, more than I'd say you have been over the last 18 months.
I'd just say that that's welcome feedback from both Kevin and Councilor Bagley.
Peter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think if we want to really be fair to everybody, we should also say how much green power people can get. How much renewable energy is our organization offering, which Eversource never advertises the fact that you have no choice in the power we give you. You have to take ours, this is the price. I think one of our selling points is that customers have the option of supporting more green energy up to 100% green energy if they wish, and it's their decision. And they can switch, they can get out anytime, they can get on anytime. Again, something that Eversource cannot do. You're not going to be switching every month. They don't want you to do that. And what we also forget is that there are third-party energy suppliers out there, many of them, and they're a big mix of prices plus renewable content. So for people to find that stuff has always been complicated and hard to do. But I also agree in what was just said about making sure that we might as well just put it out there and say, this is what Eversource is currently, the default utility is charging you. This is our rate. And, but we offer you the opportunity of getting out anytime, getting in anytime, getting greener power if you want to support that, or not, opting up, opting down. These are our advantages. And also that we're a community and we're a nonprofit organization. We are not driven by shareholders. So that we can do things as a community power organization that a stockholder company cannot do. And as was just mentioned, was not really mentioned clearly, when we first started, the rules were different. The utility had to buy power for 6 months, set a rate, and give you that rate for 6 months. Now that they're allowed to go on the spot market and get energy anytime they want, that gives them more flexibility, okay? We're still trying to keep the rate stable for our customers to say, okay, for the next 6 months, this is what you're gonna get. And that amount of, that stability builds confidence that people are not gonna be jerked around with a price that may be too low one time and too high another time. The default utility has the option, though, to go back to the PUC and get recovery for losses. We can't get the recovery for losses. We have to plan in the possibility of losses. So these are all tricks that we have to do very differently than a default utility, but we should not be trying to hide the difference between our rate and theirs, but we have also our advantages and our strengths that we can point to. And incidentally, anyone who thinks that Portsmouth getting out of community power is anyway a win for anybody, there's no penalty for it, and there's no penalty of getting out of it. We have no disadvantage of being in it. We have a lot of advantages of participating.
Councilor Bagley.
Thank you, Aaron. There is a huge advantage to the tune of millions of dollars to leaving community power for our residents. We've been in community power for 3 years. Less than 2% of users have opted up to green energy over those 3 years. They could have, before community power existed, opted into a different energy supply. We as a council took a decision to force our residents onto community power. At the time, it made a lot of sense for the reasons that were just mentioned and also for the cost savings. The calculus that we have to make is very different when we're looking at a 30% premium, on average $22 a month for a resident. We have residents that are struggling to get by, $300 a year for power that doesn't work any differently than the power they can get from Eversource is a decision we have to take very, very seriously, because the data shows even highly motivated people for green power, we're talking less than 2% of users. So whatever we pick as a council for people to use for their energy, the vast majority of our residents are going to choose that. So we have to make that decision knowing not on the 2% that want green power, but on the 98% that are just going to go with what we provide for them because they're trusting us to make decisions in the best interest of them. And if we're dealing with a company that has not been transparent about their cost structure, I have concerns.
Councilor Bagley, I just would love a perspective maybe from Mr. Creason. Sorry to put you on the spot here.
Yeah.
Part of it is that, you know, there is we had gone through and it was sold. There was a lot of talk about green energy, and that was certainly a big part of it. But there seemed to be a gap in the market in that utilities were locked into 6-month contracting, and they simply were flat-footed and couldn't move fast enough. That was certainly a view that I shared on the council when we went with Community Powers, giving more flexibility and actively pricing the ability to enter the market. The market then shifted, and Eversource has been much more competitive. Would love to hear, Mr. Crease, and you can talk about anything, but specifically on, is there benefits outside of, say we're still 98% aren't using green power and have no desire to. Are there benefits to local communities aggregating their purchasing price or their purchasing power through community options that you've seen in your work as a consumer advocate on the state?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, thank you for inviting me. It's a great pleasure to be here in Portsmouth. I've been slowly making my way to every municipality in the state, and this was a empty spot on my bingo card. I'm really happy to punch it. I want to lay my cards on the table and say forthrightly that it is not my recommendation that the city of Portsmouth withdraw from the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire. I agree with and endorse all of the concerns that I heard Councillor Bagley in particular articulate. In the world that I would prefer to live in, and that I think most consumers would prefer to live in, you wouldn't really have to think very much about your electricity usage. And that low rate that you quoted, 2% of people going on the higher tiers, and the relatively few customers who opt out of whatever they're opted into, suggests to me that most people do not want to think about their electricity. And it's not because people are stupid or because they're not aware, it's because people are busy, right? We're all busy having our lives, raising our families, maybe enjoying our retirement if we're old enough. And in a better world, you would be able to simply nominate a trusted agent to make those choices for you without you having to think about it. But that's not the world that we live in. We live, unfortunately, in a world where everybody has to think a little bit about their electricity, where it's coming from, what they're paying for it, and what the implications of that are. So I think one thing I should say is that it might be incumbent on my office to do a better job of becoming a readily available source of objective information about where the cheapest electricity really is, because I think it is just human nature being what it is, and the financial imperatives that the Community Power Coalition lives with being what they are. It's a bit unrealistic to expect them to just like put up in big flashing red lights, hey, by the way, we're not your cheapest option, so you should choose somebody else other than us. Why don't you all go back to Eversource? I think customers should migrate back to Eversource when the rate is cheaper. There's no doubt about that. If you can get electricity for 11.5 cents instead of 14.5 cents, you should pick the 11.5 cents. So I think it's very important to have frictionless switching back and forth amongst all of the options, and we're not there yet. We're not as frictionless as I would like us to be, and people should have access to the information they need to make reasonable choices. That said, I am here, I think, to defend my friends at Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire. I've watched them since before they launched at close range, and I don't know any other entity in the state that is more resolutely dedicated to the welfare of the citizens that they're ultimately serving. The mayor asked me, do I see value in the joint power agency model? And I most assuredly do. I mean, obviously, we have all enjoyed the right as individual customers to pick an electric supplier other than the utility since Competition Day back in, I think, 2001 is when it originally was. The only options available to us as residential customers were, I would say, undesirable bottom feeders until the advent of opt-out community power in 2023, really. And, there are really two ways of doing community power. Each municipality can go it on its own, or you can band together in combination with other municipalities. And it's just simple economics that CPC&H has more hegemony in the wholesale market as a bigger organization than this city or any other individual municipality would be going it alone. So I recommend sticking with the joint powers agency model for that reason. The other thing I think it's important for you all to understand about CPCNH and anybody else that's doing community power aggregation right now in the state is that they're confronting a moving target in that the PUC has done a poor job of overseeing default energy service. And so what we have is a situation where the utilities don't necessarily know what the rules of the game are going to be. The utilities have on occasion been allowed to assert what I would regard as unfair competitive advantages in the wholesale and retail marketplaces. And the utilities have recourse to non-bypassable charges that the folks at CPCNH don't. So the folks at CPCNH are rebuilding their reserves the hard way. The utilities, I think, get to do it the easy way by basically backfilling their under recoveries through charges that everybody has to pay. So that's a live conversation that's being had right now at the legislature and at the PUC. And these folks are trying to cope with that. And I think they're doing a pretty good job. I haven't hesitated to criticize them. To some degree, that's an example of me looking for the keys underneath the lamppost rather than where I drop them. And, you know, sometimes I think with friends like me, they don't really need enemies because we hold them to a very high standard. And they are very highly engaged with us. I watch them at close hand. They are open, they're transparent, they're responsive. And I think what CPCNH needs to do now that it has a permanent general manager in place, is really move forward in a pretty bold, decisive way and make sure that it doesn't get too lost in the temptation to have the governance bodies assert too much day-to-day control over the organization. I think you in the city of Portsmouth, in combination with your fellow municipalities, have to make sure, have to send a message to the management of CPCNH that you trust them to make responsible choices. And I have confidence that they will make responsible choices. So I agree with everything Councilor Bagley said, but I don't think the answer is withdrawal, is the short answer to, I think, the question you wanted to hear me answer.
Thank you, Mr. Cruz. Councilor Cook.
Yes, thank you so much to the consumer advocate for sharing those views. I share them as well. And I also thank you to Councilor Tabor for explaining the discussion that occurred at the Energy Advisory Committee. Any recommendations on community power or changes to community power, I think first should always come from our Energy Advisory Committee because they are really the experts on what we are doing with our energy policy in the city of Portsmouth, and I trust them to make those key recommendations. I do have a question around the fairness of the system that we're dealing with between the PUC and the way that rates are continually being set, and whether or not House Bill 1733, if we think that it's going to pass, and I don't know who should answer that. I saw that it passed unanimously through the House, but is in this consideration in the Senate, and this would change some of the reality around the way utilities are setting their rates and recovering rates, because I've had a serious concern around rate recovery being levied against not just supply charges, but also against delivery charges. So,
yeah, that's a good question. So House Bill 1733 came out of the House committee and then moved over to the Senate in one form, and it had a unanimous bipartisan 18-0 support, where everyone on the House side sort of liked this idea. And what the bill did is it did two things. It said, you know what, the way we read the purpose of utility default supply is to be a stable backstop, not in active competition with the marketplace. It should be sort of the safety net for those folks that aren't shopping in the market, but as a monopoly utility, you shouldn't compete with that marketplace. As such, it said no more spot market purchasing, go back to the stable fixed price contracts, because when you're in the spot market, there's more risk, it's shifted to customers, and there could be these deferral of costs. When your rate doesn't reflect the actual cost of power and you have an undercollection, there's now a distorted comparison. So that it did two things. One, no more spot market, back on fixed price contracts, and then two, the utility isn't allowed to charge the under collections to, say, the cities and towns that have community power programs. To a stranded cost charge, where now if you're on Portsmouth Community Power, you pay for Portsmouth Community Power, and then on the delivery side of the bill, you pay for the Eversource under collection. So it would prohibit that. Went into the Senate. There was more discussion. I think the Department of Energy and the Public Utility Commission said, hey, you know, we still want to explore this spot market approach. Let's do more study. And the bill passed the Senate. It removed the prohibition on spot market, so that's still allowed in the current form. And there's language to say no shifting costs onto the stranded cost charge, except under extraordinary circumstances, which, you know, could be, you know, looked at as a loophole for certain circumstances. So anyway, the bill has been weakened. I think it's a step forward in terms of this. The policymakers understand this is an issue, sort of where there's smoke, there's fire. We need to address this in some fashion. But it does sort of remain unresolved. And the question still stands, you know. On the one hand, if those under collections are charged to the Portsmouth Community Power customers, like that's clearly not a fair market. But I don't think that's, you know, hopefully that wouldn't come to pass. And then there's this other question of just really, should utilities, you know, and really it's the Public Utility Commission that has prompted this. I think our colleagues at the utilities, they're sort of responding to a directive from prior Public Utilities Commission chairman. So I think they're happy to do procure power, however they're told to procure power by their regulator. This question of should they be in the spot market, should the regulator be perhaps, you know, imposing some level of competition against the cities and towns that have local control programs, those are open policy questions.
So we're going to have to cut it because we have another council meeting. We'll open it up to a quick public comment. I will just say that we talked about utility. We're still on the supply side when it comes to, you know, Eversource. See them in the audience or representatives from Eversource tonight. When a squirrel chews through a transformer, they are out there just as quickly in a city that has community power. And if we think about the real challenges or some of the real challenges that we can foresee to energy, it's a lot of it's going to be on the delivery side. How do we meet a demand of electrification of cars, of heating, of all these things that we proclaim to want to happen? That's going to require a lot more infrastructure than we have today. So we're in the same boat. So as we think about, you know, how we're doing that, to be able to think about infrastructure as well. But I'll open it up to public comment. Peter?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want comment to Councilor Bagley's comments. The city is not forcing anybody to buy anything.
Well, I think
wait a minute. What we did is when we joined this group is the community power is we offered the citizens of Portsmouth the opportunity to make choices on their own and to get out of it at any time you want. Nobody's forcing anybody to stay in. And incidentally, there is that third-party customer choice that we had in prior years. And when people looked at that, they need to lock in their rate for like 2 years or 6 months at a certain level. Very complicated. Very few people made use of it because it was so complicated and because you couldn't get out.
Peter,
we can get out anytime.
We can get out anytime. I do think it's good to call balls and strikes. You know, we made a decision to opt everybody into something, and we saw immediate financial benefit at the beginning because Eversource is locked into longer contracts. Everybody can opt out, and I think what we're, you know, at least coalescing a lot of us around tonight is really increase the ability to opt out more easily, more transparently, and to, again, you're not a privately held company. You are our representation to be, you know, maybe not as ecstatic about when you're missing the mark, but to share that as vehemently as you share when you're beating it, I think is what we would expect. And there's a lot of things that we build up with having a community power that are beneficial more than just the 2%, to be able to have, you know, bring more competition in the market, which ultimately will support a better competitive landscape in the energy markets throughout New Hampshire if this can work. So I know I shouldn't be talking as much, but if there's anybody that wants to speak at public comment or just for On this, we'll have public comment again at the council meeting. Please speak to, for, or against.
Your Honor, I have a hand on Zoom.
And on Zoom.
Mr.
We
Kennedy.
have, Your Honor, there's Representative Reynolds.
Oh, we'll take Representative Reynolds and then, and we'll go to Esther right after that. Yep.
Thank you very much. I'll be quick. Just introducing myself, Ned Reynolds, current state representative and member of the House Science, Technology, and Energy Committee. Been there this term and last term debating these issues. I guess I just want to say that I agree with, I urge you all to heed the advice of the consumer advocate and keep Portsmouth in the Community Power Coalition. The current situation where Eversource has not, the Eversource rate has gone below, or the community power rate has gone above, is a result of a distortion that came from a directive by, as it was referenced, a former chairman of the PUC directed the utilities to buy half their energy from the spot market. That was great when the spot market price was low. Now that we have war in the Middle East and energy prices rising, that chicken is going to come home to roost in the future. So everybody loves spot market when it's low, but when it's going to turn around. So people do have the ability to opt out, as has been discussed. It would be a mistake, for, I believe, for Portsmouth to pull out of the Community Power Coalition. So that's just what I wanted to let you all know. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Reynolds.
Esther on Zoom.
Esther.
Yeah, hi, thank you, everyone. I guess my concern is, are we looking at a school care situation? I am in community power. I've chosen to do that because of the fact that I worry about other people, so I think it's important to be in so I can speak on it. But also, I do believe that it's good to have a multitude of resources. However, I'm very worried about, given the world and what's happening, what is being in reserves with community power. I question that. I think it's really low, and I'm hearing tonight that it would have to be raised. My power would have to go up in the price to increase those reserves. So I think that's a real concern. My other concern is the lack of transparency. I agree with everything Councilor Bagley has said. He is totally right on this. There hasn't been transparency on it. People are wondering why their bills are going up, and yet some friend somewhere else is not, and they think they have the same power source, and they don't. I think that has been fraudulent at the city council level. I would also like to add that why isn't the city of Portsmouth, if we believe in this, why isn't the city of Portsmouth actively participating in community power? I find that disheartening. I find you threw all the citizens into it, and yet our own government, local government, couldn't join it. Those are some questions I have, and those are some of the takeaways. But I do believe you need to build the reserves in a way that's sufficient and not going to gouge the residents. And I also believe you need a lot more transparency. What I heard tonight was disgusting, that we weren't sending out all the information. So thank you for the time to speak. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Esther. Any other speakers? Just two quick ones on that. We do have a contract that precluded us from entering into community power as a city. I believe that that contract may be up soon, Peter. So next fall. And also, you know, as a part of transparency, this is a part of the transparency, guys, having this conversation, bringing everybody, appreciate the meeting that was held, in terms of the Portsmouth Energy Advisory Commission. I was appreciative of community power themselves coming and spending a night here with us. So I was appreciative of the consumer advocate coming and sharing his perspective here. So this is a part of the transparency that goes into having made the decision to enter into community power, and I look forward to more conversations around this and the continued work on the Energy Advisory Committee to keep us more informed. And I appreciate the vigor, Kevin, specifically where you stated that it was a failure, that we needed to have, more transparency in terms of the pricing, and would expect to see that, going forward. Again, our job is not to advertise. This is an extension of who we are as Portsmouth, and there's benefits to that. And the more we lean into that framework, the better, as long as we're as easily as making it possible to show where we are and how you can change as a consumer. I think that's the takeaway that we had tonight. I know we're going to have more conversation about it at our council meeting, but I just want to thank everyone for being here this evening. Wish we could spend more time. Thank you.